Charles, there's an amazing array of stuff going on. I don't know if you're getting sick of winning yet, but it's a little bit of a defeat for Mr. Trump in Congress. How are you today, Charles?
Very well, though I went to sleep and trusting you with moving the project forward and everything was supposed to go the right way. And I wake up and, everywhere I look, there's a problem. I'm just teasing. But great poster and great progress here in the residential library and apartment. But on the various issues, I'd say the first one is this War Powers Act vote. And I have done a little bit of researching into it. The the War Powers Act narrowly passed in 1973. It was a very close vote, and then after its passage, Nixon vetoed it. But unfortunately, what he also did is he fired the Archibald Cox and the Saturday Night Massacre. So the War Powers Act was the veto was overridden by both houses of the House and the Senate in 1973. Right. Since 1945, there has not been a single declaration of war against any country. Right. Both recent Democratic presidents after the War Powers Act, I just focused on Clinton and Obama, both engaged in sustained military actions without getting approval under the War Powers Act. So, and I think when you see an asshat like Rosa DeLauro, who truly is, if there are hybrid alien human beings, she's one of them, trying now to micromanage from the House what's going to go on here vis-a-vis Iran. The founders understood this issue. And distinguished, and the writers at the time the Constitution was adopted, Alexander Hamilton and Federalists 69 and 74, both understood the distinction between a reaction, a defensive reaction, and an offensive war. And I think the Trump White House would be, if it's functioning properly, and it's a big if, given that we will talk about acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and his many missteps. What I think you'd want to do here is you're going to want to consult, if that's possible, with the Supreme Court to get a sense here. If Trump pushes this all the way into the Supreme Court, where is it going to end up? The Supreme Court might decline to take to get into the melee, but judging what's going on in Iran, we have a regime in name only in Iran, right? I don't think it's in the United States' interest now to strengthen the hand of the theocracy, and I'm certain we don't want a country in Iran led by the IRGC. So who is actually going to bind the people of Iran? Who is going to stand up as a legitimate government of Iran in any end case game here, where either terms of surrender or some kind of resolution document are signed? I think that's a big question. If the Trump team is forced now to work with 535 people, 435 congressmen and 100 senators, to try to navigate this crisis. That's certainly not something that is in the interest of a future Democrat, for example, president, having to deal with, say, a House that's in Republican hands or a House and Senate that's in Republican hands. So when sane minds focus on this, if they ever do, I think they're going to end up giving the Trump team the latitude they need to get to a resolution here. That's, if sanity prevails. But looking at what's going on beyond this Iran conflict, you have multiple people, not fake names, but multiple people alleging on the one hand that Trump has suffered a stroke 8 days ago. And that's why he hasn't been seen in public. And this interview with Miranda Devine that was just released was pre-taped. So you have people going down that alley. You have other people now, and it's really disgusting to even have to bring this up, alleging that Donald Trump bought Melania from Jeffrey Epstein because she was washed up as an escort, too old. People saying that. You have people apoplectic at the notion that Bill Pulte would be DNI. And I think the reason they're apoplectic is that there isn't a national security file on Bill Pulte the way there are such files on Mitch McConnell, for sure, and Mark Warner and others. So this is overnight, I would argue, as dangerous as the world was in the last 24 hours, it's become a lot more dangerous.
That's quite a thing, Charles. When you say there's no national security file on Bill Pulte, I mean, a lot of people have been maybe simplifying the point that you're getting to by saying, oh, this guy has no intelligence experience. I think you mean to say he's not a guy who's under the control of the intelligence community in the way that some of these other people are.
Exactly. I mean, he's a young guy. He's a rich guy. At least his father's rich. I don't know. I suspect he's rich too. And he's shown already that he's quite willing to act aggressively to try to root out public corruption, as he did in the case of Tish James and others. Anytime you see the same seemingly sensible argument, which is actually false, being promoted heavily by the Democrats in coordination, you know it's a stunt. So, for example, when the settlement with Trump on his lawsuit against the IRS was announced, people were saying, which seems like a reasonable argument, that Trump had won in the settlement a lifetime immunity from any audit for him and his family. And that is absolutely not what the terms of the settlement said. Right now, we can debate the weaponization fund. We'll talk about that later, maybe. But so that's bullshit. Then they're saying about Pulte that he harnessed a government database, a secret government database, to go against Tish James, and you know very well that that's not the case.
I know very well that's not the case.
Right. That's why I bring it up.
It's crazy that they said that, isn't it, Charles? They said that he did that to manufacture some sort of evidence against her. That's not true at all. It was all public domain evidence, and it was very strong evidence. See, I think Tish James is someone who is protected by the intelligence community or some kind of community.
Yeah. Well, so what, maybe there's so many things we can talk about. We may do a little bit of dancing around here, but there's a thread, an interesting X thread that has been diving into what Mamdani is trying to do with this idea of the city government in New York can decide whether a landlord is responsible or not. And then what they can do, and they do already, is they can target people they don't like and put them in jeopardy of having the bank foreclose on their loan or whatever. And then they can pressure the bank and they can say, listen, it's in the city's interest for you to just eat this loan, and we're going to turn this property. You're going to eat the loan. Now we're going to have an unencumbered asset, and we're going to give that to a nonprofit, which is run by our friends who can kick money back to our causes. That's what they're talking about. This is old-fashioned highway robbery. It's no different than what in the olden days, before the way olden days. Once you left the protection of the city walls, you were at risk of going around a corner on your horse and seeing what they called a journeyman, lying in wait with you and either exacting a toll or saying, guess what? That horse is not your horse. The shit that's in your pack is mine now. That's what we're talking about here, using the incredible intrusive reach of New York City's government. When I was a kid, I tried to start a business in New York City. And my parents said, you can do what you want. So I went down to whatever it was, that building at the base, the monstrous building. And I went to office after office after office as like a 14-year-old kid trying to put together a business. And it was ridiculous, the attitude of the people there. And when you own real estate, particularly rental real estate with more than, I think it is 4 units or 3 units, you have city inspectors who could come at any moment and allege there's something wrong and get paid off personally. You have all sorts of different departments now that can hassle you. You have a situation where, excuse me, the person who was pulling Joe Biden's strings, whether that was Barack Obama or somebody else, led into the country 10 million people in 4 years illegally. And where did those people go? They didn't go to Idaho, the northern Idaho, where there's no support services. They went to cities, particularly in New York, in Los Angeles, and other places where there's a big social safety net that is so big that people can use that net or those nets for fraud. And so you have all sorts of criminals inside New York City now. You have this mayor who is encouraging the idea of defunding the police, and also, this new idea that the city decides whether you're a responsible landlord.
But well, let me just back you up a second, Charles, because you breezed past a pretty seemingly important part of it. So he's going to convince banks to just eat the loan.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about, tens of millions, or who knows how many times
Billions.
they'll do that. Yeah. So, I mean, nobody just eats that. It's going to basically result in people getting charged more to use banks, or maybe interest rates going up, right? Give us some more details on that. What happens there?
Well, what I think is going to happen is that if I were a bank, if I were Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan, a large bank that pays a lot of people billions of dollars per year, all of which is taxed at absurdly high rates. I just, without any advance notice. I mean, there is a rule in New York actually that you have to give advance notice if you're leaving the city, if you're terminating jobs and leaving the city. I'd do whatever I had to do to comply with the law, but I'd make a final decision. I'd say, not only are we leaving New York as JP Morgan, we're not going to lend money to anybody who is based in New York, any business, any person, any government. We're not going to do it. Fuck you.
By policy.
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, it's like saying you have to go into China, for example, where you can't get your money out. I mean, this is basically what he's done. This is ma'am dummy. And they're not doing this because they want to increase the prosperity in New York City or state. They're doing this because they want to bring down the system. They want to have the talking point that New York City has gone full on commie. We'll call it National Socialist or whatever. And the rest of the country needs to follow suit in 2026 in November on the 3rd, and in 2028 in the presidential election. That's what they're playing for.
You can really tell just even by the way the thing is being marketed, this block by block. This is like his Obamacare, right? This is like a really marketed thing. And they're saying that it's gaining, support for the plan is growing. Oh, well, this is nyc.gov telling us this.
It's total bullshit. Total fucking bullshit. As a young kid in the 70s, I guess as a teenager in the 70s, for much of the 70s, the city was decimated. You couldn't get, later in the early 80s, I tried to buy a brownstone. And I was told that, you get only a tiny little mortgage. When I bought my weekend property, there was no commercial mortgage opportunity. I had to get a loan from the seller. That's the direction we're heading here. And when that happens, prices plummet. In 1980, I could have purchased if I had the money, I could have bought a Park Avenue 8-room apartment for around $200,000. That's where you're headed with this. And unfortunately, for people who, many Park Avenue apartments there aren't mortgages on anymore. But when you go and you abuse the capitalist system as they are trying to do lawlessly, I mean, think of what Tish James has done with E. Jean Carroll, right? They changed the law to eliminate a statute of limitations, then allow a nutcase to make unfounded allegations, in my view, and waste millions of dollars to get Trumpy. You do the Mar-a-Lago lawsuit. I mean, this is a wanton lawlessness, wanton, craven lawlessness, and it gives, what? How do all these people, with no family wealth and no high income experience in the private sector, how do they have all this real estate? How widespread is this practice? Why does Tish James have so many properties? How did she get the seed money for the first one? And how many Tish James are there? If there's 700 assistant attorney generals, how many of those people have gone in the same program? How many people in DC? How many staffers in DC? How many politicians around the country are doing this? You can't, on the one hand, because of AI, gut the private sector, right? And at the same time, bloat the public sector. And in particular, AI is relentlessly bringing down the cost of human labor in real terms, in nominal and in real terms. Whereas in the public sector, I wonder what the average total compensation package is for an assistant attorney general under Tish James. Probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars if you properly account for the pensions and other benefits.
It's interesting to see the convulsions over Bill Pulte and particularly who's doing it. There's, obviously Tom Tillis has been very vocal about it. He had some kind of Senate hearing with Scott Bessent, and apparently Scott Bessent told Bill Pulte he was going to kick his ass, and he smiled about it when he told the Senate. People who watch Crowdsource the Truth probably will remember it was just over a year ago that I uncovered all of this information about Tom Tillis and all of his mortgage stuff. So you just raised the question, how many people in Washington, D.C. are doing this stuff with mortgages? I mean, we've seen evidence of Tillis. We've seen evidence of Adam Schiff. Tish James, certainly there was a whole question of what was going on with her father and what he was doing with mortgages. I found evidence causes me to believe she faked her father's death and has essentially been like an epic arch criminal over this, mortgage. In many ways, Charles, for these people, it's the perfect crime because, you take out a gun and you go into a bank and stick the place up. Everybody realizes that's a crime. That's a dangerous person. But when you can walk out in public in your, hey kids, it's Kool-Aid pantsuit or whatever the hell Tish James wears. And
circus tent.
Yeah. And basically, remain seen, as this respectable member of society who I'm sure Tish James plans to run for governor or something like that. And frankly, has a good chance of winning in this lunatic state. So, I mean, this is like, we're playing for keeps here. And just getting back to Trump and this whole episode of what's happened here just in the late hours, this is a really, really bad turn. He lost this whole fund. Apparently he said he's not giving up on the fund necessarily, but you had the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, saying they absolutely unequivocally are. We should talk about that some more when we get to the sponsor exclusive segment. It's only a few minutes away. I hope people will join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Just as a small diversion, I know this is right up your alley, Charles, but speaking of Patreon, the CEO, Jack Conte, released a statement about this bricks and minifigs scandal with the Legos, where they received apparently a temporary restraining order from this company, Bricks and Minifigs. It's like $100 million a year company with franchisees and everything. Conte said they're not going to kick Reckless Ben off of Patreon, so that's pretty interesting.
That is interesting.
Anyway, back to the more important stuff. It seems like there's a lot of people dipping their hands into this mortgage piggy bank, and maybe that's the reason Donald Trump is bringing in Bill Pulte, because perhaps he's very qualified. We do need to talk about him because we're hearing, oh, this guy's not qualified, but we're talking about a job that was held by James Clapper, who doesn't seem really qualified for much more than being a door greeter at Walmart.
If that, he's a bad liar. Every time he was lying, he's pulling his ear. You know,
Maybe
it's a
that's how he
miracle. I mean, that
operates
man.
his mouth.
Well, it's a miracle that that man held the security clearance,
Yeah.
right, and functioned at a high level.
He does have one of those elongated heads. Maybe he's one of these hybrid aliens.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, anyway, there's so much more to say about all of this, Charles. Where do we want to continue the conversation?
Well, I mean, I think we have to start the two most dangerous ones are Iran and Ukraine. On you Spending a second on Ukraine, the Ukrainian forces supported by some powers, guessing NATO and hopefully not the United States military directly, are now striking deep into Russia. And Russia, unlike the United States, Russia's been very clear in what they've been saying for really since 1992. And they've been very patient. And this idea that whoever was pulling the strings behind Biden could say in 2022 that we're not interested in the history. Russia just invaded via a special military operation. They're the invader. That's the way we're going to look at it. Forget the history. I mean, you can't do that, right? And hope to actually have a real settlement. If this is about prolonging a conflict so that money can flow into a crooked government and flow back to politicians around the world, okay, that I understand. That's awful. And people doing it should all be in jail or shot after a trial and the money recouped. But if you want to have a lasting peace, I mean, Ukraine now has what's left of it. It now has a pretty large fighting force. After any settlement, what are they going to do next? Do we really want a militarized Ukraine? Could it decide to attack Poland? Could it decide to I think we've created a monster here. We have an illegitimate government in Zelensky's government. It suspended election many months ago. There's no sign of new elections. This is a man who is crooked as fuck. The people around him are crooked as fuck. We don't seem to be doing anything about that. And Russia is, despite the sanctions, despite this ongoing conflict, Russia is actually doing pretty well economically, particularly with high oil prices. So that's a mess.
Yeah. Well, we were just looking at this New York Times article talking about how Ukraine struck St. Petersburg on the first day of this Russian economic conference. I don't know if you've been too busy perhaps to see, but earlier today I had a brief exchange with Hunter Biden. This was pretty interesting. He replied directly to me when I asked him, he basically was here saying, so let me get this straight. Jake Tapper is focused on attacking my mom. Jared and Ivanka are building a private island paradise on Albanian protected land. Don Jr. married the daughter of Epstein's banker. Goes through this litany of stuff. And then he says, oh, but people are worried about Hunter's paintings. I told him he raised valid points, but most people are more concerned with his business deals in Ukraine before that war. He wants to distract people. And then I posted this picture of him standing here with Kenneth Rakoshev. This is February 2014. It obviously struck a chord because he responded right to me, said the pardon went back to 2014 because that was the scope of the tax investigation he was indicted for, failing to pay his taxes on time, which he paid in full with penalties. I mean, this is a lot of excuse making right here, I think, but we'll see, what he has to say. He said he has no business deals. I don't know, is being on the board of directors of a Ukrainian company a business deal? It's not a vacation.
Well, I don't think he's still on that board, but the point is, people are very artful here in the use of tenses. Remember, there is no sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky. That's not the question. The question is, in the past, what was going on? And with regard to Hunter and Ukraine, my understanding, and it wasn't just Hunter, it was Heinz fellow. His father had been a senator, Republican senator, and it was Romney as well, who were messing around in Ukraine. And the issue is, did they register appropriately under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act? And more importantly, were there discussions with Joe, or it seems there may have been, where to further a business project in which Biden family members made money was closeness to Joe and an ability to influence Joe as vice president and president, a factor in receiving the compensation that the family members may have received. And if it was, that's clearly illegal. I don't think, I would hope that Jared and Ivanka are not calling Don up and saying, hey, their father up and saying, hey, man, you're the president. We want to buy this island off under the control of Albania. What I know you think we should put gold everywhere, but what kind of, how should we do it? Well, what architectural firm? Why don't you're good at ballrooms? We should have a ball. I mean, I don't think they're doing any of that. I think these are independent business transactions, but
let me just pause you for 1 second, Charles, because we do have to make our way over to the First Amendment Forum. People can join us there on subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. Also, people who follow me on X, including Hunter Biden, if he'd like to, at JG_CST. Join us over there. We're going to talk about all of this. You and I have spoken extensively about questionable deals that the Trump children are involved in, and Hunter raises some good points there. So we'll be right back. Lots more to discuss. Stay with us, everybody.